The cream-colored envelope with gold embossing sat unopened on my parents' kitchen counter for 3 days. Mom kept walking past it, picking it up, then setting it down again with shaking hands. When she finally tore it open on Thursday morning, the color drained from her face so completely that Dad rushed over, thinking she was having a medical emergency. "What is it, Helen?" Dad asked, reaching for the invitation that had slipped from her trembling fingers onto the marble floor. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got to that moment. My name is Rebecca Martinez. I'm 29 years old, and I've spent my entire life watching my parents worship my younger sister while treating me like an afterthought. The pattern was so consistent that I'd stopped expecting anything different, until their behavior during Sophia's wedding planning reached levels of favoritism that shocked even me. It started 18 months ago when Sophia announced her engagement to Trevor, a financial advisor from a family that owned 3 car dealerships in our Connecticut town. Within hours of the announcement, Mom had already called 4 wedding venues and scheduled appointments with 3 different wedding planners. "This is going to be the wedding of the century," Mom declared during Sunday dinner, her eyes shining with the kind of excitement I'd never seen directed toward anything involving me. "Sophia deserves perfection, and we're going to make sure she gets it." Dad nodded enthusiastically, already pulling out his phone to research photographers and catering companies. "Money is no object for our princess. This wedding will be everything she's ever dreamed of." Princess Dit. That's what they'd called Sophia since she was 5 years old. Meanwhile, I was Rebecca, or sometimes just the other one when they were talking to friends about their daughters. The wedding planning consumed our family for the next 14 months. Every conversation, every family gathering, every phone call revolved around Sophia's dress, Sophia's flowers, Sophia's venue, Sophia's catering choices. It was like I'd become invisible, even more so than usual. Mom quit her part-time job at the accounting firm to focus entirely on wedding coordination. She spent 8 hours a day calling vendors, scheduling appointments, and obsessing over details that most people would consider minor. "The napkins have to be exactly the right shade of blush pink," Mom would say during her daily wedding update calls with Sophia. "I've ordered samples from 12 different suppliers because nothing can be less than perfect for your special day." Meanwhile, I was finishing my master's degree in environmental engineering, while working 30 hours a week to pay for SC, pool, and rent. My graduation was scheduled for 3 weeks before Sophia's wedding, but nobody in my family mentioned it. Not once. "Rebecca, can you pick up Sophia's dress from the alterations on Saturday?" Mom would ask, not even looking up from her wedding planning binders. "I'm busy with the florist, and this is too important to delegate to someone who might not understand how crucial the timing is." I became the family's unpaid wedding assistant, running errands, addressing invitations, and handling logistics. Said Mom was too busy to manage herself. It wasn't that they asked nicely, it was assumed that I would drop everything to support Sophia's wedding preparations. The financial aspect was the most revealing part of their priorities. Dad, who had always been careful with money and lectured me about the importance of living within my means, suddenly became a blank check when it came to Sophia's wedding expenses. "The venue wants $40,000 for the reception space," Dad announced during one family meeting. I told them we'd take it. Sophia can't get married just anywhere. $40,000 for a venue. That was more than I'd earned during my entire final year of graduate school. But Dad signed the contract without hesitation, the same man who told me I should consider community college instead of university, because education was getting too expensive these days. The dress shopping expedition revealed the extent of their financial commitment to Sophia's perfect day. Mom, Sophia, and 3 bridesmaids spent an entire Saturday at bridal boutiques, trying on gowns that cost more than most people's cars. "This one is beautiful," Sophia said, modeling a dress that was undeniably stunning but carried a price tag that made my stomach drop. $8,500. "It's perfect," Mom gushed, already reaching for her credit card. "We'll take it, and we'll add the cathedral-length veil and the custom beading along the train." The final dress cost $12,000 after alterations and accessories. $12,000 for one dress that Sophia would wear for 8 hours. The same parents who had told me that my $600 graduation dress was unnecessarily expensive and impractical for someone just starting their career. But the dress was just the beginning. The photographer cost $15,000 for engagement photos, wedding day coverage, and a custom album dye. The flowers were $18,000, because Sophia wanted peonies flown in from Holland. The catering was $35,000 for a 5-course meal, with premium wine pairings. I started keeping track of the expenses, partly out of morbid curiosity, and partly because I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Every week brought new costs that Dad approved without question. Custom wedding cake, $4,000 live band for reception, $12,000 wedding favors, crystal picture frames, $3,500 bridal suite at luxury hotel, $2,800 rehearsal dinner at Country C. Lub, $8,500 by the time the invitations went out, themselves costing $2,000 for custom calligraphy and gold foil. My parents had spent over $95,000 on Sophia's wedding. Nearly 6 figures for one day, from parents who had always preached financial responsibility and modest living. The contrast with their treatment of my achievements was stark and painful. When I made Dean's List every semester during graduate school, they sent a congratulatory text message. When I received a full scholarship for my final year, reducing my student loan burden by $30,000, they said, "That's nice, honey," and immediately changed the subject to Sophia's engagement photos. My graduation ceremony fell on a Saturday morning 3 weeks before the wedding. I'd been looking forward to it for months, the culmination of 3 years of intense study, research, and writing. My thesis on sustainable water management had been selected for publication in a peer-reviewed journal, and I was graduating summa cum laude. "Will you be able to make it to my graduation?" I asked, during a family dinner 6 weeks before the ceremony. "It starts at 10 a.m., and the reception is afterward." Mom looked up from her wedding planning timeline with obvious irritation at the interruption. "Rebecca, that's the same weekend as Sophia's final dress fitting and the bridesmaids' luncheon. We can't possibly reschedule those events. They've been planned for months. The graduation is only 3 hours. You could attend the morning ceremony and still make the afternoon luncheon." "Sweetheart, you don't understand how complicated wedding logistics are," Dad said in his most patronizing tone. "There are dozens of moving pieces that require our attention. Your graduation is just one ceremony, but this wedding affects 2 entire families." Just one ceremony. The ceremony represented 3 years of academic achievement, professional preparation, and personal growth. But in their hierarchy of importance, it ranked below. A bridesmaid's luncheon. I've worked really hard for this degree, and it would mean a lot to have my family there. This is Sophia's time, and she needs our support. You can walk across the stage anytime, but your sister only gets married once, hopefully. The casual dismissal was devastating, but it wasn't surprising. I'd learned not to expect parental support for my achievements, but somehow, I'd thought graduation might be different. Important enough to warrant 3 hours of their attention. I graduated summa cum laude with no family members in attendance. My roommate Emma took photos of me receiving my diploma, and my thesis advisor Dr. Patterson congratulated me on my academic excellence and research publication. But the empty seats where my parents should have been sitting were a stark reminder of where I ranked in their priorities. Meanwhile, the wedding preparations reached fever pitch during those final 3 weeks. Mom was stressed to the point of tears over flower arrangements and seating charts, while Dad managed vendor payments and logistics coordination. The entire household revolved around ensuring Sophia's perfect day. The wedding itself was undeniably beautiful. Sophia looked stunning in her $12,000 dress, the venue was elegantly decorated with those expensive Dutch peonies, and the reception featured gourmet food and professional entertainment that impressed all 200 guests. But watching my parents' faces during the ceremony was what really struck me. They were glowing with pride and joy, tears streaming down their cheeks as Sophia walked down the aisle. It was the kind of parental love and celebration I'd always hoped to see directed toward my own achievements. During the reception, Dad gave a heartfelt speech about Sophia's accomplishments, her character. He talked about supporting her dreams, celebrating her successes, and the joy of watching her build a beautiful future with Trevor. "Sophia has always been our greatest blessing," Dad concluded, raising his champagne glass. "She makes us proud every single day, and we couldn't be happier to welcome Trevor into our family." The applause was enthusiastic, and several guests commented afterward about what a loving, supportive family Sophia was lucky to have. If only they knew that this level of support and celebration was reserved exclusively for one daughter. After the wedding, I expected some return to normalcy in our family dynamics. Maybe with Sophia's big day completed, My parents would show some interest in my life, my career prospects, or our own relationship with my boyfriend Michael, whom I'd been dating for 2 years. Instead, they seemed to crash emotionally after the wedding high. Mom spent weeks looking through wedding photos and reliving every moment of Sophia's perfect day. Dad complained about post-wedding financial recovery, but in a way that suggested the $100,000 expense had been worth every penny. It was the most beautiful wedding I've ever attended, Mom would tell anyone who would listen. Every detail was perfect, and Sophia looked like a princess. We're so proud of what we accomplished. What we accomplished. As if the wedding had been their achievement rather than Sophia's marriage celebration. Meanwhile, my job search after graduation was going exceptionally well. I had received offers from 3 environmental consulting firms, including one position with the Environmental Protection Agency, that represented exactly the kind of meaningful career I'd been working toward. I got the EPA position, I announced during our first family dinner after the wedding. It's based in Washington, D.C., with a starting salary of $75,000 and excellent benefits. I'll be working on water policy development and environmental impact assessment. That's nice, dear, Mom said absently, still scrolling through wedding photos on her phone. Did you see this picture of Sophia's bouquet toss? The photographer captured it perfectly. $75,000 starting salary with the federal government, working in my field of expertise on issues that could affect millions of people. But it warranted less attention than a photograph of flowers being thrown into a crowd. I moved to Washington 6 weeks later, establishing my career and building a life that my parents showed minimal interest in understanding or supporting. They called occasionally, usually to share updates about Sophia's married life or ask if I'd seen her latest social media posts. During my first year at EPA, I was promoted twice, received recognition for exceptional performance, and was selected to represent our department at a national conference on sustainable water management. But when I called to share the news, Mom interrupted to tell me about Sophia's anniversary dinner plans. Mom, I'm trying to tell you about my career achievement. This is a big deal. I'm the youngest person ever selected for this conference presentation. Rebecca, that's wonderful, but I really need to focus on helping Sophia plan her first anniversary celebration. We want it to be special, and there are so many details to coordinate. More details to coordinate for Sophia, while my professional recognition received minimal acknowledgement. The pattern was so established that I'd stopped sharing good news with my parents, knowing it would be dismissed or overshadowed by whatever was happening in Sophia's life. But then something happened that changed everything. During my second year at EPA, I was approached by the White House Office of Environmental Policy about joining their team as a special assistant for water policy. It was an incredible opportunity, a chance to work directly on environmental legislation and policy development at the highest levels of government. The position came with significant recognition, a substantial salary increase, and the kind of responsibility that environmental engineers spend their entire careers hoping to achieve. But more importantly, it came with access to high-level government events, including state dinners and policy conferences that were attended by world leaders. After 6 months in the White House position, I received an invitation that made me realize how I could finally get my parents' attention in a way they couldn't ignore or dismiss. The president was hosting a state dinner for the Prime Minister of Canada, focused on environmental cooperation and sustainable development policy, DEO. The guest list included cabinet members, congressional leaders, business executives, and senior policy advisors, including me. But this wasn't just any state dinner. It was being covered by every major news network, with guest interviews and extensive photography that would be featured in newspapers and magazines throughout the country. The kind of high-profile event that generates social recognition and family bragging rights. I decided to invite my parents as my guests to the state dinner. Not because I expected them to appreciate the policy significance or understand the career achievement it represented, but because I knew they couldn't ignore the social prestige and public recognition that came with White House events. The invitation was printed on official White House stationery, with gold embossing and the presidential seal. It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Martinez and included details about the dress code, security protocols, and the honor of attending a state dinner as guests of their daughter, Rebecca Martinez, Special Assistant for Water Policy. I mailed the invitation on a Tuesday, knowing it would arrive at their house on Thursday. Then I waited to see how they would react to tangible evidence of the career I'd built, while they were focused on Sophia's wedding planning and married life. The phone call came Friday morning at 7:30 a.m. Rebecca. Mom's voice was shaky, almost whispering. "We received your invitation yesterday. Yes, I thought you might like to attend the state dinner with me. It's next month, and I can arrange a security clearance if you're interested." "Rebecca, honey, I don't understand. How did you get invited to a White House state dinner? Is this real?" The question revealed exactly how little my parents understood about my career or achievements. They were so disconnected from my professional life that a White House invitation seemed impossible rather than the naturally result of my policy work. "Mom, I work for the White House Office of Environmental Policy. State dinners related to environmental issues are part of my job responsibilities. I thought you knew about my position." "You work for the White House? Since when?" Since then, I'd been in the position for 6 months and had mentioned it during multiple phone calls, but they'd been so focused on Sophia's anniversary planning and her new apartment decorating that they hadn't absorbed the information. "I started this position 6 months ago. It's a senior policy role working directly on environmental legislation and international cooperation agreements." The silence on Mom's end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had been dropped. "Mom? Are you still there?" "Rebecca, I'm looking at this invitation and it says you're a special assistant for water policy." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means I advise the president and senior administration officials on environmental policy development. I write briefing papers, attend policy meetings, and represent the administration at international conferences." Another long pause. "You advise the president? Among other responsibilities, yes." I could hear Dad's voice in the background asking what was happening, followed by Mom explaining the invitation and my job description in hushed, amazed tones. "Rebecca," Mom said when she returned to the phone, "why didn't you tell us you worked for the president?" "I did tell you, Mom. Multiple times. But every time I tried to explain my career developments, the conversation got redirected to Sophia's anniversary plans, or her apartment decorating, or her job at the marketing firm." The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. They'd been so absorbed in Sophia's life that they'd missed the most significant career achievement in my professional development. "Well, this is incredible news," Dad said, taking the phone from Mom. "Our daughter works at the White House. Rebecca, we're so proud of you." Proud of me. The words I'd been waiting to hear for 29 years, and they came only after I'd achieved something that carried social prestige they could brag about to their friends. "Would you like to attend the state dinner with me?" "Of course. Absolutely. This is the most exciting thing that's ever happened to our family. The most exciting thing that had ever happened to our family. More exciting than my graduate degree, my EPA position, my research publication, or my professional recognition. But exciting enough now that it involved White House access and photo opportunities." The state dinner was 3 weeks away, which gave my parents time to shop for appropriate formal wear and obtain the security clearance required for White House events. But more importantly, it gave them time to process the reality of my career achievements and recognize what they'd been overlooking. Mom called me every day leading up to the dinner with questions about protocol, dress codes, and what to expect during a formal White House event. But mixed in with the logistics questions were deeper inquiries about my work, my responsibilities, and how I'd achieved this level of professional recognition. "Rebecca, I'm ashamed to admit this, but I don't think I really understood what you do for work. Can you explain it to me again?" "I develop policy recommendations for federal water management, environmental protection, and international cooperation on climate change issues. The work affects legislation, federal regulations, and treaties with other countries." "And you've been doing this kind of work since you graduated?" "I started with EPA after graduation, then moved to the White House position 6 months ago." "Oh, yeah. It's been a progression of increasing responsibility and recognition." "Why didn't we know about this progression?" The question hung in the air because we both knew the answer. They hadn't known because they hadn't been paying attention, too focused on Sophia's wedding and married life to notice my professional development. "Rebecca, I think your father and I owe you an apology. It was the first time in my adult life that either parent had apologized to me for anything. We've been so caught up in Sophia's life events that we haven't been good parents to you. We should have been celebrating your achievements and supporting your career just like we supported her wedding." The acknowledgement was validating, but it also highlighted how dramatic my career success had needed to become before they noticed it was worthy of their attention. The state dinner itself was everything I'd hoped it would be. My parents were visibly impressed by the White House setting, the distinguished guest list, and the formal protocol that governed every aspect of the evening. But what impressed them most was seeing me interact confidently with cabinet members, congressional leaders, and international diplomats. They watched me participate in policy conversations, introduce them to senior government officials, and represent environmental expertise that was clearly valued at the highest levels. "Rebecca, I had no idea you moved in these circles," Dad whispered during the cocktail reception. "You're talking to people I've only seen on the news. This is my professional environment." "Dad, these are my colleagues and the people I work with on policy development." During dinner, I was seated at a table with the Canadian Minister of Environment and several senior EPA administrators. My parents were seated nearby, close enough to observe my interactions but far enough away to appreciate the independence and expertise I'd developed. The evening included formal remarks by the President and Prime Minister about environmental cooperation, followed by cultural performances and networking opportunities that extended late into the night. But the most meaningful moment came during the receiving line, when the President personally thanked me for my work on the water policy briefing that had informed his remarks during the dinner. "Rebecca's analysis has been crucial to our understanding of international water management cooperation," the President said to my parents during our brief interaction. "You should be very proud of her contributions to environmental policy." My parents stood speechless as the President of the United States praised their daughter's professional expertise and policy contributions. It was validation at a level they couldn't dismiss or minimize. The drive home from Washington that night was the first time I'd ever had my parents' complete, undivided attention for an extended conversation about my career, my achievements, and my future goals. "Rebecca, I don't know how to apologize adequately for not supporting you the way we should have," Mom said from the passenger seat. "Seeing you tonight, watching you work at that level, I realize we completely failed to recognize what you were accomplishing. We spent $100,000 on Sophia's wedding," Dad added quietly, "but we didn't even attend your graduation ceremony. That's inexcusable." The acknowledgement was painful but necessary. They finally understood the disparity in how they'd treated their daughters and the achievements they'd chosen to celebrate or ignore. "I don't need you to feel guilty about the past," I said. "But I do need you to understand that my career and accomplishments deserve the same recognition and support you've always given Sophia. From now on, they will," Mom promised. "We want to be better parents to you, Rebecca. We want to celebrate your successes and support your goals the way we should have been doing all along." The conversation continued for the entire 3-hour drive, with my parents asking detailed questions about my work, my future career plans, and the policy issues I was most passionate about addressing. 6 months later, when I received a promotion to Senior Special Assistant for Environmental Policy, they invited extended family, friends, and neighbors to celebrate my career achievement, giving speeches about my professional expertise and policy contributions that demonstrated genuine understanding and pride. "We're incredibly proud of Rebecca's dedication to environmental protection and her service to our country," Dad said during his toast. "She's achieved something remarkable, and we should have been celebrating her accomplishments all along." The party cost them $8,000, a significant expense, but one they undertook enthusiastically to publicly recognize my professional success. It was the kind of celebration and family support I'd always hoped to receive. More importantly, our family dynamic shifted permanently after the White House dinner. My parents began calling regularly to ask about my work, seeking my opinion on environmental issues they saw in the news, and sharing my achievements with friends and extended family. When I was invited to speak at the United Nations Climate Summit the following year, they attended as audience members, sitting in the front row and beaming with pride as I presented policy recommendations to international environmental ministers. "That's our daughter," I heard Mom whisper to the woman sitting next to her. "She's one of the top environmental policy experts in the country." The recognition I'd always wanted from my parents finally came, but only after I'd achieved success at a level they couldn't ignore or dismiss. It took a White House invitation to make them realize that their other daughter had been accomplishing significant things while they were focused exclusively on Sophia's life events. The lesson I learned wasn't about seeking parental approval or proving my worth through career achievements. It was about understanding that some people only recognize value when it comes with external validation they can understand and brag about. To others, my environmental policy work had always been meaningful and important, but it took presidential recognition for my parents to see it as worthy of their attention and pride. The same expertise and dedication that had earned me graduate honors, EPA recognition, and White House appointments became valuable to them, only when it carried social prestige. But ultimately, their recognition, however late it came, allowed us to rebuild our family relationship based on mutual respect and genuine pride in each other's achievements. They learned to celebrate my successes with the same enthusiasm they'd always shown for Sophia, and I learned to appreciate having family support even if it took longer to develop than I'd hoped. Tell me about a time when your family finally recognized your achievements after years of overlooking them. What did it take for them to see your worth, and how did their delayed recognition change your relationship with them?